So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this, I think, fairly short webinar that we wanted to give to introduce people to the Frontline Network Alliance funding opportunity that we've got available. I'm joined this afternoon by my name, I've just missed a bit out. My name, I'm Tim Bissett. I am the director of the St Martin in the Fields charity. I look after all the charities operations, and I am actually at St Martin in the Fields this afternoon. I'm joined by my colleague Mark Filippo, who is our interim head of development, and we're going to be taking you through this together. And our colleague Rachel Marshall is here as well, and she will be helping us with tech and questions. We're going to record this and make it available for people who can't be with us today. And we're going to leave some time at the end for questions. If you've got any questions for us, either use the Q&A button or pop it in the chat. Just make sure it's directed to panelists and attendees so that we can all see that. If you've got any questions as we go through, just ping them in there, and we may pause and answer them as we go through, but it's more likely that we will take those at the end. So let me kick off. We are the St Martin in the Fields charity. I think many of you will know our work. We are based here at St Martin in the Fields in central London, but our operation extends to all 4 nations of the United Kingdom. Our vision as a charity is that everyone has a safe place to call home and the support that they need. We're about supporting frontline workers across the UK as they empower people experiencing homelessness to ensure and keep a safe place to live. This whole kind of funding opportunity that we've got is built on our mission, vision, and values. And I hope you can see where our thinking has come from as why we've come with this opportunity. Our visions, our values are very much about how we work. So really that says very clearly that what is important to us is that we work with those who understand homelessness best to find solutions together. We don't claim to have any great answers here. We try to work in a way where we listen and learn from people. We seek information, and we tend to make decisions based on evidence, often drawing on the extensive frontline network that we've got. We work in a very relational way. We act in ways that foster trust and understanding, and we hope that you see that within this process, that we are as clear and as open in what we're trying to achieve. And we hope to be available to people so that you can come to us and talk about this as we put together the programme. And we really kind of focus on outcomes as well. We hope we work quickly. That's always an arguable thing, but we try to work quickly. We favour simplicity over bureaucracy. So we hope this process isn't too onerous, but there needs to be some kind of rigour behind it at the same time. So for those of you who already know us, we are probably best known for the BBC Radio 4 Christmas Appeal with St Martin in the Fields, which we manage each year. This is our kind of major fundraising activity. St Martin's has had a relationship with the BBC for many years. The appeal is into the mid-90s by now. I can't remember how many we've done, but it's probably about 94 or 95 Christmas appeals with the BBC, and it's the longest running radio appeal in the country by, I suspect, some mercy mile. Other people will know us through our Vickers Relief Fund. We make rapid crisis grants to enable people to either access accommodation, often through deposit grants, or to prevent eviction through covering off arrears to get people into accommodation. And people will know that we flexed this grant during the pandemic with an emergency version of this, which we saw huge take up, and has had reach again right across all 4 nations. People may well be aware that we also support the Day and Night Centre here on site at St Martin's, the Connection at St Martin's, and for many years we've made a substantial grant to the Connection to support their work. They're our sister charity who work predominantly in Westminster. And of course, people will know our Frontline network, which is there to support frontline workers, people from the public, statutory and voluntary sectors working directly with those experiencing homelessness. And that network is really about supporting those people to be effective in their work. We believe that that kind of improves the outcomes for the people that they support. We already have a network of partner organisations which help us build the Frontline network right across the UK. I'll just show you the list here. These are all on our website. These are the current partners that we're working with, and within this process, Mark will talk a little bit more later about how partners are eligible to be part of this new programme. And we've just done some work to bring 3 new partners on board, a partnership supporting women, a thematic partnership, which is based out of Yorkshire. And then we're building the new South Yorkshire Frontline network and also a new network in Northern Ireland. You'll hear more about that in the coming weeks and months. So that's a little bit of context about us. I'm going to hand across to Mark, and Mark is going to talk you through the Frontline Network Alliance.
Thanks, Tim. Can you continue to be my glamorous assistant, please?
I am. I'll be very good at this. I can press buttons. Although for the people who were on the call earlier, maybe I can't.
So I'm going to talk to you specifically about the Alliance. If you move on to the next slide, please, Tim. What we're looking to do here, as Tim sort of explained, is we have already that we fund our sister charity, the Connection at St Martin's, around distinct service delivery, but we haven't had a programme that's extended beyond that to support service delivery around the UK. So we're looking particularly to do that, and we've made available £500,000 for 3 years, and we anticipate that we'll be awarding to up to 5 charities around £100,000 per year to support our mission to support frontline workers, to empower people experiencing homelessness to secure and keep a safe place to live. Thanks, Tim. And what we're really keen to do is to enter a working partnership with yourselves as organisations. We don't want a traditional funder-fundee relationship. Our existing partner network works on the idea that people work within their local communities, but also come together to share that experience and learning. So we would want to be partnering with organisations who'd be able to share their learning with the other successful organisations. And we're looking to support funding either to help you deliver existing services more effectively, or to develop a new service where there's where you've got an evidence base, where you've identified that there's a need for something, but what is needed is a bit of money to kickstart that. And we recognise that needs to be over a number of years, and that's why we anticipate it being a multi-year partnership. As Tim said, because our income streams are fundraised, we always have to be slightly cautious, but we are very optimistic that we would have the funds to be able to deliver this programme. Otherwise, we wouldn't be taking ourselves through this process, let alone yourselves. Thanks, Tim. So we've identified some focus areas, and these focus areas are not exhaustive. So if you're sitting there and thinking, well, actually, we've got a really good idea and we're not sure that it fits into your suggested areas, that doesn't rule you out. as you're probably aware, our basis is about being from the ground up, about what frontline workers have fed back and told us is needed to support their work in addressing homelessness. And these are the areas that we have heard most commonly, most loudly. So they're areas that we've identified as we've heard about, and we'd like to be involved in supporting some solutions to that. But as I say, they're not exhaustive. So the first one is around immigration and homelessness, and particularly about things that address the needs of those with no recourse to public funds. Particularly a very live issue at the moment, as the government the UK government, sorry, I should say, are starting to look at how people still living in hotel accommodation, following everyone in, what might be the future responses to their housing need, and there may well be some need to look at that. The second area is about health and homelessness, and about the difficulty that there can be accessing specialist healthcare, particularly around dual diagnosis. And by dual diagnosis, we're meaning predominantly around mental health and substance use, but not necessarily exclusively. Again, that may be someone being on the autistic spectrum and having a mental health problem, or another similar combination. Thanks, Tim. We've also heard a lot about the need to do work with those people sort of who fall under the umbrella of hidden homelessness. Obviously, we take a broad definition of homelessness, and by its nature, anyone who would fall under that umbrella of hidden homelessness may need more distinct responses to sort of assist with their housing situation. And because they're out of sight of the statistics, they're sometimes outside of the solution. So particularly interested around that. And also interested around about safe and inclusive spaces and practices. So this is a very sort of area that's very in development, but about looking at where there's the need for gender specific services, ensuring that services are trans inclusive, and particularly we've heard very recently, we had a webinar ourselves from AKT, formerly known as the Albert Kennedy Trust, talking about the particular challenges and also the particular sort of limited services received by those identifying as LGBTQ+. So particularly interested in looking at those sorts of areas. Thanks, Tim. Then a couple of other areas. Older people experiencing homelessness. It pains me to say, I'm about to say that includes men between the age of 30 years and the late 50s. But I think that we are constantly hearing that, particularly for men, not exclusively, but because women may be more picked up around caring responsibilities than men on average, that this group may be a little excluded from solutions. And similarly, about looking at solutions and work for those who are leaving secure systems. So that might be the criminal justice systems, it might be prison, it might be long-term psychiatric inpatient treatment, it might be young people leaving the care system. So they're the sorts of areas that we've identified that we sort of highlight, but as I say, not exhaustive. What we do want to ensure is that we're funding work that is collaborative and works in a multidisciplinary way. We don't expect that's going to be a problem for anyone listening to this, and we don't expect that that's surprising. But our whole ethos is about developing and sharing good practice. So if that practice is collaborative to start with, then that helps that sharing. Thanks, Tim. So our approach, yes, there is an application form. There is a link to it both on the website and if you've received this via emails or on social media, and we'll be uploading this webinar and the presentation with it. So we do ask questions. we are going to ask about clarity about what you want the money for, why, how it will benefit, and what will be the difference. I think perhaps more particularly for us, we'll be asking about how people working on the front line and the people they support have informed this. So personally speaking, I've worked in senior roles for provider organisations. I've worked as a commissioner for a London borough, and I have been involved in, and I've written and I've seen a lot of top-down proposals, many of which are very good. But what we are particularly interested in is capturing where the knowledge base is coming from the bottom up. So we'd also like to hear from the people whose experience is informing the idea. Thanks, Tim. We'd encourage you to keep in contact with us as you develop your grant application. So we have deliberately asked a number of open questions. So you won't find many questions that are going to be asking you yes, no, how much. Most of it are going to be open questions for you telling us what you think about those areas. That's deliberate. That's because we don't want to control the process more than we need to, but that is going to make it perhaps a little bit more difficult for you at the other end to think like, well, what do they mean? Could that include this? So later on, we're going to share the email address where any queries could come in. And so please do contact us. We're happy as well to pick up the phone and have a phone call about potential applications. That's without fear or favour. It's we won't look at applications differently depending on how much contact there's been or anything like that. But obviously, we'd encourage you to have the amount of contact with us you need to do to help you develop your grant application. And I think the other thing is we are looking for organisations that are happy to share their stories, because, as I said, our funding of other organisations is dependent on us being funded. And we do need to say what we're doing, and we do need to share our stories. We do so in a very sensitive way. We just have a new messaging framework, which is very much focused on ensuring that we are focused on the individual, that we're not claiming successes that are not ours to claim, that are theirs to claim, and that we are not putting people at risk by telling their story. But so there's lots of sensitivity about how we do that, but we do need a commitment that people would be willing and able to share some of the stories of their work. Thanks, Tim. So we're welcoming applications from all parts of the UK. And as we've said, we pride ourselves on being for nation approach. And so we want to be upfront and say that we would look to try and spread where we were supporting. That's not as simplistic as saying we'll have one from here and one from there or anything like that, but we would look to have a breadth. And because we already support the Connection at St Martin, we will be prioritising spend outside of London, because the Connection at St Martin work exclusively in London. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Tim.
Sorry, it nearly worked, but then it stopped. Bear with.
There we go. So there's some specific criteria there, which is all included in the paperwork that you've already had sight of. It needs to be, the organisation needs to be a registered charity or a community interest organisation, and there needs to be a structured board, and that needs to be of at least 3 people that are unrelated to each other, so not family-held trusts. Need to have bank account, need to have reserves of less than 12 months operating costs, and that's simply because we want to ensure that our money is going to where it can most make benefit, and if there's higher reserves, it may not be needed. organisations would need to have a published set of accounts on one of those three country-specific regulators there. So that's the Charity Commissions of Northern Ireland, or the one for England and Wales, or the Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator. You need to have a safeguarding policy in place, and obviously, not surprisingly, a track record of actually working with people experiencing homelessness. So, as I've said, you can ask questions about the criteria or the process by emailing us at frontline@stmartinscharity.org.uk. What would be particularly helpful was if the heading in the email was Alliance, because then we would know that it was something in terms of our prioritisation, so that would be helpful. We've already got on the website a FAQs section, and to be honest, that's not frequently asked questions yet. That is questions we think we might be frequently asked. What we will do is we will update that regularly, following the questions that we get coming into us. Now, if the questions are specific to an organisation, so I don't know, an organisation saying something about, do we qualify as a charity, for example, then we will obviously respond individually to that organisation about that particular query. But if the question's something broader that other people may be interested in the answer, and we may be keen not to have to answer 30 times, then what we would do is we'd publish the answer on the FAQs without naming the agency that asked the question. So if the question was something like, I don't know, can we include a percentage of a line manager? That's a question that we could answer. We could answer in front of everyone. The answer is yes, but we could make that visible to everyone. So we would add that to the FAQs, and then on the FAQs, as we update it, we would just add saying questions received since, so that people then didn't have to go back and read through the whole document again to find the new questions. And obviously, you all will have access already to the application pack, because that's how you found out about this webinar. But again, we shall make that available again. So finally, the sort of timetable. So the closing date for applications is the 13th of August. And we're looking, we've given ourselves a month there to review and assess all applications. That will likely involve some sort of interview presentation stage. It's likely that there will be a shortlisting and then an interview presentation stage. And it's with an aim with us being able to notify all successful applicants by the end of September. And I think when Tim collects this, it's going to be open to questions. So what I'd suggest at this stage is, Rachel, maybe if you could sort of take us through the questions that have already been raised. Either Tim or I will answer them now, or if we can't, you've started to help us populate our next batch of FAQs, and we will just say we might need to go away and think about that.
Great, sure. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions already come in through the Q&A box, and anyone else feel free to type in there or the chat, but make sure to all attendees and panelists. So yeah, the first question was, will bids from non-SMEs be accepted / welcomed? And there's a sort of related follow-up question, which is asking, if a SME leads bids, is it okay for them to include a larger organisation as a delivery partner?
Shall I take that one, Mark?
Yeah.
We've used a line in the criteria, which is we would particularly like to work with small and medium-sized organisations. I think we're interested in the quality of the project and the work that you're proposing. And yes, if that was supported by a larger organisation and that added value, I don't think we would have a problem with that. What we don't want to do, though, is this money just to be lost in huge organisations and it just be a kind of another funding stream. We would like this to have a real impact for the organisation that is the recipient. If that's clear, just let me know, and then we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, Tim. I think that's one of the reasons why we're looking at about reserves, that sort of question, because I suppose one of the things we might be thinking is if this is such a good idea and an organisation seems to have a lot of spare cash, our thinking might be, well, why haven't you already funded it then? So I think it's about one of our questions that we specifically ask is about why is our funding needed for this? So if a larger organisation has a strong answer to that, then that's perfectly legitimate. So it's not excluding, but we anticipate that it might be easier for SMEs to answer that question.
Great.
Thank you. And another question, so asking, can you give examples of how a project could benefit frontline staff and homeless people?
Shall I take that one, Tim?
Yes, please do.
So I think possibly that question's coming out of me maybe not being very clear about explaining what we're looking to fund here. So what we're looking to fund here is something that directly benefits people who are experiencing homelessness, so homeless people in that sense. We fund other things that are specifically about supporting the well-being of frontline staff, and our partner networks do that. But this project is for service delivery to people experiencing homelessness. Where frontline workers come in is about them informing what the service should be. So it's about their experience, their knowledge, and that can include people with lived experience, obviously, working for your services, about coming up with the idea for the project. But the project should benefit people experiencing homelessness. So I hope that's made a better stab at that.
Great. We had another question just clarifying, is the funding just for 1 year or longer? So I don't know if you just want to recap that.
Yeah, I can try again. Yeah, so the aim, the plan, our intention is that it would be for 3 years. So we're anticipating funding 5 organisations, each organisation up to £100,000 per year for 3 years. We have to sort of caveat that, put a slight health warning on that obviously that is dependent on us being able to fundraise in the way that we have been able to in the past few years. So so there's a slight caveat to that, but our anticipation is that we'll be able to fund it for 3 years. We wouldn't be putting this forward if we didn't have that hope, because we don't think that realistically a year would be long enough to get a project up and running and be able to demonstrate its worth. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Tim.
No, I think that's exactly right. And we would look to enter into a 3-year contract, but there'd be potentially break clauses in that, which I think need to be there on both sides. We've not worked up the detail of that contract yet, but it is essentially to have an ongoing relationship for 3 years.
Thank you. And a kind of related question, just is it, if it is a multi-year grant, how is it divided, or is that down to the charity?
I think that if that means, is it a kind of equal amount each year, which I think it must mean that, I think that is down to the charity to put forward a proposal what they require. What we wouldn't be able to do is kind of heavily front loaded. It would need to be reasonably flat throughout those 3 years.
Thank you. Another question, are you interested in organisations that work nationally but are based in London, or would these be included in the lower priority because the office is based in London?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just replying to someone else who's asking whether we can see their questions, which we can. I can answer that one. So I think where we would, the answer to that is it's where the focus of the work is. So we know that lots of national organisations might have a head office in London. If If the proposal is that it's going to be supporting people in Hackney, that will be very low priority. If it's a proposal that it's going to be supporting people in Great Yarmouth, that will have a higher priority. So it's not the location of the office, it's the location of the project.
And another kind of question about scope, I guess. Does the project have to be, or have to have a local, regional or national reach?
Well, I think it'd be fair to say that that's not something that we've considered in detail. I think we would be, or personally, I would be surprised if it had a national reach necessarily, because I'm not sure that the level of funding we're offering might necessarily support that level of reach. Being a network-based, being alliance-based, we tend to focus on working within regions or localities and then building up from there. So I think our anticipation would be likely to have a more local or regional focus. But if there was something that was proposing a wider reach, that would be definitely worthy of consideration.
Right. I think another question, just clarifying the amount of funding available. Is it 500k per year or 500k across the lifetime of the grant making?
Okay, so obviously I may have answered this in an earlier question. It is £500,000 total funding pot per year, anticipated for 3 years, so 1.5 million. We anticipate that £500,000 per year would go to 5 organisations, each receiving up to £100,000 per year, £300,000 over 3 years.
Yeah, thank you. And what is the proposed project start date?
Tim, shall I take that?
Yeah, you're doing very well, Mark. I'm just enjoying these answers.
We don't have a proposed project start date because we're aware that with the time frame that we're asking people to provide this and our time frame for giving a response, in terms of sort of setup, it will depend on the nature of the project. I suppose in my head, I'm thinking if we're making decisions at the end of September, I would be thinking that things would be, prep work would be able to start ahead, and services might be going sort of live in terms of their delivery post-Christmas, but the prep work would be happening pre-Christmas. But it depends, because we are, this is not exclusively for new services. So if it's about an add-on to an existing service, we would potentially be more demanding on our proposed start date. So one of the areas where we're asking applicants to advise us is about that practicalities, is about when do they think, what sort of lead-in time would they need. I know from my experience, having been a commissioner for a London borough, that it's not always considered from the funding end about what is reasonable and what's needed. So we're asking you to tell us so that can inform our thinking. So apologies, that's not a direct answer, but that is the answer.
Great, thank you. We've got 2 kind of related questions, so I'll just read them out together about the London focus. So if London is not a priority, does this mean a London organisation will have a very low chance of success? And then a second question, we are a London-based charity with the makings of what we feel would be a good proposal. Is it worth us developing a bid when you said you're prioritising out of London applications?
Shall I take that, Mark?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of London priority, yeah, that is our prioritisation. We're looking to spend money away from London. So if it was a very London-focused project, it's likely that that would be a lower priority. However, I think we've kind of answered this other part. If you are a London-based charity looking to deliver a project elsewhere, I don't think that would be as much of a problem to us.
A question on what level of reserves would be acceptable?
Yeah, this is always a tricky one, isn't it? But what we've put in the criteria is have free reserves of less than 12 months operating costs. So I think really what we want to do is know that this money is going to make a difference and it's money that's needed by the organisation. So I think what we do is have a conversation with people about what their reserves level were. We kind of asked the question, why are you not using your money if they were free reserves and you wanted to use our money? I think that's a perfectly fair conversation to have. So we've not got an actual kind of what level is absolute, but our guidance is free reserves of less than 12 months operating cost.
Great, thank you. So just to say, we've got a few more questions in the Q&A box, and I can see we've also had a couple in the chat as well. So just to say that I can see those as well, and we'll get to those shortly. So another question here about the FAQs talk about supporting those experiencing homelessness. Does this include those threatened with homeless or vulnerably housed but not actually homeless?
Shall I take that, Tim?
Yes, do that.
Yeah, yes, yes, it would.
Good answer.
Thanks. Okay, question saying, would you fund posts helping people regulise their immigration, thus enabling them to access housing, employment, etc.?
Yeah, again, I can take that. Yes, potentially we would. So one of the areas that we've identified, as we've said, is immigration and homelessness, and we're aware from our experience of the VRF, where we do small grants to help people access accommodation, that routinely for people who need to regulise their immigration, their way out of homelessness is about ID or securing jobs as a route then into housing. So absolutely we could do, and yeah, it would then depend on the quality of the application.
Right. Can the project include grants giving within it?
Yes, it could. Yeah. It could.
Okay. Okay, question. Do all service users have to be recognised as homeless, or would you support a project that supports predominantly homeless people, but some service users may not be?
Again, I can take that. So obviously our rationale is about working around homelessness. So we wouldn't be supporting anything that wasn't working with people who are experiencing homelessness. In the situation, the question where it's predominantly homeless people and others, we can definitely consider that. We'd need to understand about what the nature of the service was and why some people were homeless and some people weren't. But it may well be that that's a strong service model for actually delivering outcomes for both groups of people. So yes, there needs to be work with homeless people. It needs to be the predominant thing. We'd want to understand if it was wanting about working with other people, why and how, I guess. That's the sort of thing that maybe is worth dropping an email saying, could we have a quick phone call? Because I could imagine that it might well be something that we would say sounds fine or it doesn't, but actually probably just a very quick conversation about what exactly that breaks down as is worthwhile.
Right. A question saying, when would the funding start?
So we're looking to make a decision by the 30th of September. That would mean that potentially funding could start from October, if that fitted with the service model that had been agreed. So an earlier question was about when would the project start. So ordinarily those two things would go hand in hand, but it may well be that there's the need to do a little bit of seed funding at the beginning to get the project started. So that would be, the definitive answer is it would need to be agreed, but the earliest could be October.
Great, thank you. And a question asking, how does this fund work with existing Frontline network partners? Will it be considered as a separate relationship? Also, will non-partners be given priority?
Yeah, I can take that, Tim.
Pretty quick.
So
It's like fastest finger first here, Michael.
yeah, so it's probably worth explaining because not everyone will be aware. So Tim's presentation mentioned that we have existing frontline partners. We work with them primarily to run support networks of frontline workers in their locality. So they are working around bringing together frontline workers, amplifying their voice. So this would be a separate relationship if we were to fund one of those existing partners for this work. So there would be two completely separate pieces of funding. In terms of will non-partners be given priority, the answer's no. Neither partners nor non-partners will be given priority. The opportunity is open to current partners, but they are not advantaged or disadvantaged by that. I suppose the only thing that I would say is that one of our existing partners is London-based, and therefore they are disadvantaged purely geographically.
Okay, thank you. A question asking, do you have a sense yet of likely chances of success? I know difficult to answer when you don't know number of bids.
I can try again. Yeah, you're right. It is difficult to answer. We don't know the number of bids. How I can partially answer that is I can say that we've got about 30 participants on this call, and we haven't given much notice of this meeting. So there's a reasonable amount of interest. And beyond that, we're not sure. We expect that it's going to be something that we will be quite oversubscribed for, because it's a relatively open offer of funding. It's not simply core funding. It's not just, you know, stick it in your bank and use as you see fit. It is to do a specific piece of work, but you determine what that piece of work is. So we're expecting it to be quite attractive. So we imagine that we will have a number of disappointed applicants, I'm afraid.
Thank you. And another question asking, does direct benefit people experiencing homelessness include projects supporting frontline services to develop practice with the ultimate outcome for beneficiaries?
Okay. I think possibly not would be my answer to that. I think that our rationale for doing this is about wanting to expand our support of direct service delivery to people experiencing homelessness. So if I'm understanding that proposal correctly, that is about improving the quality of support work so that it then results in better service delivery and better outcomes for clients. I think we feel we fund some of that sort of work through some of our other existing funding streams, and so we wouldn't want to be using this funding stream for that. And we'd want to be doing something where the relationship between the funding and an outcome or outcomes for clients was clearer. Anything to add on that one, Tim?
No, I think that's good. It's a interesting question, that one, though. But I think your answer is correct. Dare I say we might be open to challenge? Is that all right?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, with all of these answers, the first answer is use the email address and answer the question a little bit more, because for the person asking that question, there'll be a lot more detail and consideration than they can reasonably put in a question like this.
Right. I think just a few more questions from the chat that I'll now move on to. So first is, are you looking particularly for Christian-led organisations?
No. Not particularly. Not yes. So there is no relationship between who we might fund and whether or not they are a religious organisation or a secular organisation.
And a question, with getting projects up and running, can we demonstrate work we want to do in the future with this funding and not just what we currently do with very little funds?
Sorry, Rachel, would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, no worries. So with getting projects up and running, can we demonstrate work we want to do in the future with this funding and not just what we currently do with very little funds?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
if it is a build of a service, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't, it could be something that's ambitious that you want to do that's building on something that you're doing currently with very little money. It doesn't have to be wholly something that you're already doing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's almost the reverse, that if you're able to show to us that you're already doing it, then we'll wish you well and good luck, but there probably isn't a need for us to get involved.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you. And a question in the Q&A box now saying, can you clarify if service users have to be experiencing street homelessness, or does it include those who are sofa surfing or in precarious housing situations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the broad definition of homelessness. So it does include people who are sofa surfing, people who are unsafely housed, people threatened with homelessness or at risk of homelessness.
Right. I'm thinking that we may have come to the end of that stream of questions, but if I've missed any or anyone has any further ones, I can see one message from someone who was wondering if they missed their answer because they're juggling and giving away meals at the door whilst they listen to this. So I think we have gone through all the questions, but we've got the recording. I think also feel free to use that email if you want to clarify anything.
Yep. Yeah, so that's the person who's asked that. The question was the one that we just recently answered about, can they demonstrate future work that they'd like to do? And the answer is yes.
Great, thank you.
Great. So if there are no more questions, I'm literally giving people just a few seconds while I talk. We look forward to receiving some interesting proposals and applications. The answers will be given by Mark and our colleague Amanda, who's currently on leave this week. She's actually allowed Mark and I to do this, which is good, I think. So we'll be taking those questions, but do feel free to get in touch. Any questions, as we've described how to do that, and we will be as open and as and honest, and I hope quick in responses as we can possibly be. Great.
One final one I can see come in before the door closes.
That was very quick.
Thought you were getting away.
Well done.
Is just to ask about, is funding allowed for rent? Say if we're to acquire a building in the funding period.
I think we'd have to see the absolute project to answer that. Yeah.
So possibly, but I think again, it's probably worth that person contacting us via email, and we can pick up the phone and talk through what their thinking is, because it might be possible, but obviously it's a relatively low amount of money we're doing once you take into a rental of the building.
Yeah.
Super, thank you. I think that's everything.
Great.
Thanks all. Thanks very much for your interest. We look forward to speaking to you